Hello, listeners, and welcome to Shattering Superstructure, a podcast that breaks through the majority opinion and mainstream culture. I'm your host, Alex Arabian, a journalist who explores the value of art for the sake of art. In these interviews, in which I'll have occasional co-hosts, there will be no scoops, no juicy bits, and no hidden agendas, just a safe space in which one can think as one wishes and say what one thinks. And on that note, let's get to the episode. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to Shattering Superstructure. On this episode, we have the supremely talented Sev Ohanian, a fellow Armenian who's become one of the most successful and prolific producers of the past decade plus. From his days in high school and at USC to becoming one of the first Armenian Academy members with his producing partner and wife, Natalie Qasabian, to Creed 3, we speak about how he broke into the industry, obstacles and accolades as a producer, and his passion to constantly push himself to tell new stories in the medium of filmmaking. Without further ado, here's Sev Ohanian. Thanks again, listeners, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Are you in the Bay right now, Alex?
Yeah, I'm in the Bay. Yeah, San Mateo, more specifically.
Cool.
What about you?
I'm in LA, Burbank, more specifically.
Yeah, how's the start of your new year been?
It's been good. It's been hectic. My wife and I are pregnant, so it's our first baby.
Congratulations. That's
thank
awesome.
You, man. Thank you. The baby's due May 1st. So very much been that's been every day. That's fun. And we've been busy with work and stuff, but it's been good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Yeah. Not too bad. Trying to run a bit more, training for another half marathon. So
that's amazing.
Sometimes tough to balance.
As I'm eating potato chips.
Your first film, you directed it too, was My Big Fat Armenian Family, which also stars your sister.
Yes.
And you made it on a $1,000 budget, but it was a hit, within the Armenian community and beyond, both at home and abroad. So you used all of this money to pay for your tuition at USC, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was a movie I made for around $800, 90% of which was covering Taco Bell for my team. And somehow, some way, I had zero business plan, but that movie I screened at a local high school in Glendale. This is in Southern California. There's a large Armenian population. The movie's entirely Armenian. And somehow people showed up, like thousands of people showed up. I don't know that many people, at all. But they had heard about it from other people. And it was very it's a niche market. They were hungry for something that was driven towards them. And it made money, way more than I ever imagined. And you're right. I used that money to get, to help pay for USC. And this is so cheesy, so forgive me. But honestly, truly, candidly speaking, I don't even believe myself saying this, but it's true. The money wasn't even the important part for me. The important part for me was that total strangers sat their butts on a chair for around 90 minutes and watched and engaged with something that I had thought of and laughed at the jokes and, cheered at the good moments and even clapped when characters, completed their arc. That was priceless. The fact that something I had thought of and kind of while I was in class and I should have been paying attention, I was writing story ideas on my notebook and got my friends and we went and shot it all summer and spent a whole year editing it and by myself and never knew if anyone would ever see it. The fact that complete strangers engage with something like that, it was game over for me. That's when I was empowered finally as an immigrant myself, but a son of young immigrants who had no money, no relationships, no connections. That was the moment I was I think I want to pursue this as a career. And, the way it even came together, I grew up in America. My parents, I immigrated here when I was only a few months old from Germany. My parents fled Iran as Armenian Americans during the revolution then. Wow. And I wanted something really important to me because I didn't quite know if my parents had that their whole lives, which was stability. And I've talked about this before, but the idea that, you know, as an immigrant, you want that. And that's kind of why so many of immigrant parents tell their kids to become lawyers and become doctors. And it's really what they're craving. I didn't think I can ever get that with filmmaking. I looked at it, I looked at the numbers. I'm like, there's no way I can break in. I don't think I believe in myself enough. So I kind of like, I hate to call it settling, but in my mind, I was like, I love journalism. Like, I think it's just as fun. It's actually oddly way more important than filmmaking. I got really passionate about that. I was in my high school newspaper. I ended up becoming the editor-in-chief of the high school newspaper. Wow. And I interned at the LA Times. I've told the story before where like the news editor one summer, and again, this was like 2004, really got upset at me because I was a high school intern. And the reason he was upset was because he had just discovered what an online blog was. And he was asking me like, what is a blog? I explained to him, and, you know, just write whatever you want. And he's like, who writes it? I said, anybody. And he was like, how much does it cost to read? And I told him nothing. And I could see this whole man's career go flying in his eyes because, like, you know, he can maybe sense the end of print journalism as we knew it. And right. I realized that like chasing stability is wrong because there is no stability. Like there's nowhere, no career, no life path that can give you that, you know, solid ground that we all seek. And I think for me, it was like, okay, well, then in that case, I'm going to just plunge into the deep end. I want to become a filmmaker. And for me, you know, at the time I was going to undergrad college at UC San Diego, and I was kind of like, I was studying communications, but I switched it to like visual arts. And it was very like avant-garde, artsy. It was nothing like, you know, what you imagine as a film school would be. But I was also shooting little YouTube videos, kind of poking fun at my parents out of love. It was like my friend coming home and like, you know, pretending to be a dad and like yelling at his son, where were you last night? Blah, 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 all in Armenian. Like genuinely today, if I was a college student today, they would be TikTok videos, you know, and maybe they might go viral or something. But at the time, it was me using my dad's mini DV home video camera, shooting these videos, and I uploaded them on YouTube literally for like my 12 friends to watch. But to my shock, those 12 friends shared it with their friends and so forth and so forth. And it kind of became a viral thing back in the day. It was like 2007, I think. And we made a couple of these shorts and they were all funny. They were all very sketchy type things, but there was always like a kernel of truth to them. Like one of them was kind of about how there was this double standard with Armenian women sometimes in our community. How come they are being scrutinized for who they want to date, whereas the guy could do whatever he wants? So it was kind of like subtle commentary about that, all while my male friend was wearing a wig, pretending to be a woman, pretending to be a guy. Like it was very like, you know, honestly, very Tyler Perry. And when I wanted to make another short, I just had this thought of like, why don't I just make a whole movie? And if I had known at the time what I was getting into, I would have never thought to do it because it was nearly impossible. You know, I downloaded Final Draft. I got a free discount thanks to a website called Pirate Bay. Thank you. I've since paid for it, I swear. I downloaded a couple of PDFs of scripts I liked, and I kind of just like, okay, I guess I can write this. And I just, you know, I knew enough to be like, okay, there's got to be a beginning, a middle, and end. At one point, things have to get sad. At one point, things get happy, and plant some jokes and pay them off. And it was really fun. And I got my friends together. The crew of the movie was myself. I wrote it, I directed, I produced, I shot, I edited. The only job I didn't do is I didn't do makeup. But then the makeup artist quit. So then I ended up having to do that too. It was a very low budget production. All the wardrobe was supplied courtesy of Goodwill, which we all donated back. But I mean, it was a mess. Like, honestly, it was like, you know, it was first day of filming was 17 hours. It ended with cops pointing guns at us because we were making too much noise at night. It was chaos.
Holy crap.
But at the end of it all, like the lesson that I learned, which was like, wow, like I could do this. And of course, the result of like, like I mentioned, all these strangers watching it, and obviously the profit that was made that never I anticipated, it did all propel me to want to go to USC. And that's kind of where I went for my grad school, my master's. As much money as I made on the movie, I still was heavily in debt afterwards, which I think speaks more to how expensive SC is versus how much money I could have made on a tiny movie. But
you know, you surround yourself with good people, I guess, who happen to be good artists too. And that's, I think, like the best advice you've given me is like just surround yourself with like-minded people and create, and you know, don't focus on the, you know, the how or the when, or like I think this was specifically like about getting an agent. You know, some people worry about that. That they have to have an agent to make stuff, which I
Me
mean,
too.
I think, as you know, isn't true. You can do it on your own. Yeah.
USC is where I was lucky enough to meet so many collaborators who I work with to this day. I mean, just to list off a couple of them, I met a guy named Ryan Coogler there. He was at the year above me, so he graduated before me. And when he finished at USC, and he was this phenomenal director and writer at USC, he made all these great short films that I remember just always being just incredible, like for a student film especially, but let alone he ended up asking me to come and produce and help produce his first movie, a film called Fruitvale Station, shortly after I graduated. And it was entirely based on like my reputation and what he had heard about me from others. I met a guy named Anish Chaganty while I was at USC. I was a TA, and he was one of the students in my undergrad class, and he and I began writing together shortly after USC, and we've written a couple of scripts together. And then, he's a director, so things that we write together, I produce and he directs, and that includes movies like Searching, Run, and something else we're about to make soon. And then I think the last, arguably most important person I've met at USC was a woman named Natalie Qasabian, who we became friends. And since Natalie and I, we started producing together. We made all these indie films. Like we worked with the Duplass brothers a couple of times. We started making, she was a producer on Searching, she was a producer on Run, and then a movie we just released called Missing, she was a lead producer on as well. And more importantly, Natalie and I are married now. So it was all kind of thanks to that. So in addition to so many other collaborators we met, and by the way, like, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm not even that big of a proponent of film school. Like I don't think it's necessary in any way to do what we do. It was a very expensive way for me to meet a couple of people who I've become lifelong friends and collaborators with. But by no means do I think you need to do that. I think there's a far easier or possibly far cheaper way to make those same connections and meaningful, find those meaningful opportunities without having to go to a film school, especially when it's expensive as USC. But yeah, I think you're right. Like those were the two pinnacles for me. It was making that film and what it taught me, and what it empowered me to want to pursue, and also being in that space where I met those collaborators.
It could be a Hollywood romance story for the movies in and of itself, you meeting Natalie at USC.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing. And I forgot, or I don't think I knew that you met Anish at USC as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's, like you said, a frequent collaborator. So did he work in advertisement, or was he what did he major in? And also that, to that point, I think the sort of Google, what was it? The Google Glass opportunity.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear about that.
totally. It's honestly one of the most defining experiences I've had that to this day continue to like resonate. So the story is Anish was at USC as an undergrad student in the film school.
Okay.
And I was there as a graduate student in film school. When I graduated, I remember I had a class where I was a TA, and Anish was really impressive to me. I thought he had a really good story sense, and we really seemed to click like ideologically about our approach to life and family and culture. When I finished USC, I was able to be a co-producer on Fruitvale Station, Ryan's first movie. Mm-hmm. We had a great run at Sundance. We won a bunch of awards. We had a great sale. And shortly after, Anish reached out asking if I can have a drink with him. And we got together, and he was kind of pitching me. He's like, I really want to write a script. And he's like, I have 5 ideas. I'd love to just know what you think is the best idea. Pitch me 5 ideas. Like number 4 was my favorite. And he was like, dude, that's actually my favorite too. And I was like, whoa, I'm like, maybe we should, start working together. And somehow or another, after a few months, he and I were writing that script together. And it was a movie that we have never made and probably never will make. It was a ridiculous $200 million heist movie about a group of thieves stealing a gorilla from the LA Zoo to save its life. Anyway, we definitely got into a good rhythm, and it was very clear that he and I, we just work really well together. And we kept thinking we should write a smaller movie that we can make for like sub-$1 million, because at the time I was trying to produce a lot of, like, I was becoming like a junior producer. I was making I was line producing basically. Like, I was doing budgets and scheduling and kind of like the nitty gritty work on these very tiny micro budget movies. And we were thinking of what to write. Then an opportunity came my way from USC, which is Google reached out to 6 film schools around the nation and gave them Google glasses If you remember what these are, rest in peace. They were like these
do
big
remember.
funky glasses. There was a little camera. There was like a mini augmented reality thing. They were kind of awful, honestly, and they didn't last long. But what they wanted to really prove by giving the glasses to the film schools was that these were viable filmmaking devices, meaning that you could film a short film with the camera on this thing and it can be entertaining and it could work. Spoiler alert, they were awful. Like they were not at all viable. But I saw the opportunity here because I'm like, oh, this is a pretty major brand. I've always had a slight itch for like innovative storytelling and things that are a little bit unconventional. And I was telling Anish, I'm working on this. And he was like, dude, I want in. And I was like, okay. I pitched him as because the school was asking me to produce one of them because I was I guess a well-known alumnus or whatever producer. I brought in Anish to produce, and I'm gonna give you the full uncensored story because it's a little bit risky. Basically, there was already a script attached. What they wanted these things to be for some reason was just tech demos. Like Google would have been happy if it was somebody walking on the beach at night, in a nightclub, on a car, like just there was no mission to make a story or an ad or anything. But we were tasked with making a heavy metal music video. I think the idea was that it would be, I guess like frenetic and like cool lights or something. Anish hated that idea. And I don't think he was wrong to hate it. I told him to come up with something else. He came up with this brilliant idea for a short film called Seeds that we would shoot on the Google Glass. And we had a budget of like $2,000. And he was like, I think I can use this budget and do something crazy. So we put together a deck and we took it to our advisor at the school. And the guy axed it. He's like, this sucks. It was a bummer because we were really into it. So we said, well, how about this? Let us shoot the music video and then we'll pay for it. Let us shoot this other idea. And for some reason, we were still told no. And there was this weird thing where like any of the communication with Google, we were not privy to. Like we would get emails forwarded to us, but all the Google people's information would be scrubbed. So it was kind of like tough, because we could feel we were onto something good here, but there was like this bureaucratic thing in between us and what our goal was. And we realized we have to make this heavy metal music video that no one kind of wanted to make. And Anish and we were watching a lot of House of Cards that summer. If you remember that show?
I do.
It was all about people doing like, Machiavellian like maneuvering and stuff and manipulation.
Right.
We realized that the only reason we wouldn't make the heavy metal music video is if the band dropped out. And the band, by the way, was like a tiny band. Obviously like a local, like, LA thing. They weren't even that enthused about it. Basically, I would call the manager saying, hey, we're going to do this music video. It's going to be really hot. They're like, okay. I'm like, we don't have any coolers. And he was like, oh, okay, really? I was like, yeah. And we need them to be all wearing fur coats. And then like, I would call him back later, be like, hey, we're not gonna have any food. I would call him back later saying, hey, can the band help us like, move all the lighting equipment or whatever? I just kept asking those questions. And eventually the band, for some reason, dropped out of this commercial. And we were like, no, when we told USC, we're like, guys, this horrible thing happened. But hey, good news. We have this other idea. We have Seeds. And the advisor was like, no, we don't like that idea. And I was like, just let us make Seeds until we find another band. And what we had for Seeds, and the idea was we were going to spend the $2,000 on a round trip flight from San Francisco to India. And that was it. That was the entire budget. And, anything we were missing, we would just add with points. But the idea is we would track a man flying all the way from his home with his wife in San Francisco to India, and then traveling through the streets of India and like going on boats and skiffs and trains and all to arrive at a destination, which is his mom's humble house in the middle of the outskirts of some Indian, city. And he would give her a package. And like to spoil it, the package it was an ultrasound that he and his wife were expecting, and that the mom is about to be a grandmother. That was the idea. It was brilliant from Anish. And our idea was to make it all no dialogue. Like we just wanted it to be universal, that anybody from any culture, any creed could watch us and get it. But we were told because it's a tech demo, there has to be sync dialogue. And we were like, dang, that's such a bummer. And we couldn't win that argument. So this craziest thing happened. Anish landed in India. There was only enough money for one person to fly. So obviously that was Anish. And he sent me an email saying, bro, I got bad news. The microphone on the camera broke. I was like, oh no. Like, is there a Radio Shack you can go to? And he was like, no, man, it's India. There's nothing. I was like, dang. So I forwarded the email saying, guys, bad news. Like, there's no more sound. Like, we have to record this without sound. And like the advisor was like, damn, that sucks. Maybe we'll fix it in post. So, obviously, if you're reading between the lines, we were trying to be, our version of Kevin Spacey from House of Cards. We were being incredibly asshole douchebag liars, but we were doing it for the art.
Yeah.
So Anish shot this stuff, and then we edited it into something that I thought was brilliant. Like, it was like a 3-minute, everyone who watches it would immediately get emotional. But for some reason, the advisor didn't like it. He was like, I think it's cheesy. And we realized that, holy crap, Mother's Day is like 2 weeks away. If we can somehow get this to Google, they can release this on Mother's Day and it can kind of become a big deal. But the problem was, again, we were never connected to Google. So Google did not even know we were doing anything. And we kept asking the advisor, he wouldn't let us put us in touch. And we realized we had to, rely on the internet. So we went on Facebook and we looked at all of our friends, and you could do like a search, advanced search, to see which of our friends works at Google. We found a girl that was actually in our class named, I won't say her name, but there was a girl in our class who was dating a guy who worked at Google. And it was amazing. So we hit her up. We're like, hey, and this Mother's Day was now like in a week and a half. We're like, hey, we'd love to take you out to dinner on Friday night. And she was like, I have a boyfriend. And we were like, oh, we know, like, bring him too. I don't know how she agreed to it, but we took her to dinner with her boyfriend. At dinner, Anish pulled out his iPhone. I pulled out my headphone. We gave the dude the headphone and the iPhone. We asked him to watch the video. And immediately he started crying. He's like, this is phenomenal. He's like, do you guys mind if I show my boss on Friday? I'm on Monday. It was Friday night. And we said, well, at this point, Mother's Day was that upcoming Thursday. We were like, can you show your boss tomorrow on Saturday? He ended up showing his boss. Boss loved it. Next thing you know, Google is flying out from New York to meet us. And they're saying, this is phenomenal. Who are you guys? When did you guys make this? Again, the task was, can we show a tech demo? But we ended up making something that was, like an emotional advertisement, very similar to everything Google had been doing at the time. And very quickly, they're like, we're going to release this on Mother's Day. They offered Anish a job to go work in New York City directing commercials for Google. It's kind of called like the Google 5. Like, they bring 5 people from different, academic backgrounds to like essentially develop their commercials. I ended up on Bloomberg TV News, like talking about this. I was on a list of Hollywood's top innovators next to Angelina Jolie. Like, it was
that was in 2014, right?
2014. This is all when this is happening. The worst part is we got a call the night before the release from the advisor at USC, who was furious. You guys went behind our backs. You went and talked to Google. This is uncalled for. This is horrible. And like, I remember initially we were kind of nervous, but then we were like, wait a minute, we've graduated. Like, it's not like they're going to kick us out. And then of course the video comes out, it blows up, it gets really viral and brings all this honor to USC and all this like amazing good press. And of course the dean loves the video. They start screening the video at USC every year. And of course the advisor looks really good now because that was the person that was in charge of this program. So the advisor loves us. But because of this situation, I now had my writing partner who was directing commercials in New York City, and I was still producing all my little indies around the country. And we were like, we got to find something to write, a movie that you can direct, Anish, that I can produce. And it all kind of led us to Searching, which was the first movie Anish directed, the first movie that we wrote together. And that was my first time kind of like as a quote unquote lead producer. And genuinely, the reason we got that meeting was because of that commercial that we made.
Whoa. I mean, that's so amazing that, and also it's kind of a testament to how many different lives like a project can have, script changes, just curveballs right and left, right? I mean, I bet that kind of prepared you as a producer for future like projects and negotiations just in general, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, Anish and Natalie and I, we just, we made Searching together, made Run together, we just released Missing together. And every one of those projects, there's moments where something is getting in the way of like the heart of the project. Like some arbitrary rule, sometimes bureaucratic, sometimes political, is preventing like the good art from being made. Yeah. And once you have enough clout, power, or money, it's easy to overcome those obstacles. You can throw money at the problem, or you could like, slam your fist on the table and be like, I won't stand for this or whatever. We've never had any of those things. I think we have been, and to this day, I still feel like we're very much underdogs. So it kind of always feels like we're still those kind of scared, recent student graduates who are trying to figure out how can we find a way to keep alive the heart of this project, because it would have been so easy for us to just be like, okay, we'll make the music video, or like, okay, we'll shoot dialogue, or okay, we won't send this to Google. But as much as I'm honestly a little bit ashamed of how deceptive we had to be, which I try not to do ever, it was retrospectively like the right thing to do, because it was kind of the only tool we had. And again, I'm just happy that the advisor looked amazing to his boss, because it was like, you shepherded this project, and I'm sure he took all the credit, which that's fine with me. But yeah, I think that was it was an amazing microcosm of like what a good creative producer can do, because you have to protect your director's vision. You also have to challenge that director's vision. You also have to challenge the studio that's trying to challenge you. And like, obviously you don't win every single fight, and not to say that you're always right. Anish and I could have been wrong. Maybe we should have made the heavy metal music video for all we know. I think obviously in this particular case, it's easy to look back and be like, yep, we did the right thing. But that's half the battle too. Like, is this worth fighting? And, I always think about producing. Someone taught me this really recently, which is like producing is like having a bag of nickels. And every time you fight for something, you're expending a nickel. And you got to be conservative, because if you lose too many of your nickels, you're the guy who's fighting for everything. And now your fights have less meaning. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I don't think I've ever told this full story ever before. So this is definitely an Alex Arabian exclusive.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's definitely about choosing your battles, and as an artist, like sometimes you want to really fight for your art, and sometimes you just gotta take it with a grain of salt, and it's hard. Yeah, I bet especially just with the amount of like, you guys call yourself the underdogs. I bet it's just magnified, and we always have to keep adapting to and learn. You never perfect that balance of, okay, did I do the right thing, did I do the wrong thing? But it seems like you've made most of the right calls, like you said, looking back. So, I mean, it's and you and your wife are also, I think, one of the latest members of the Academy, right?
Yeah.
You have to be some of the first Armenians, right?
Wow.
To be in there, I would assume.
Man, it's funny. I think I meant to look that up, and things got so hectic this last year. I don't know if I have. I'll be honest with you, Alex. I was a little bit conflicted about joining the Academy when we got that surprising news. I mean, we never applied for it, and to this day, Natalie Qasabian and I became members of the Academy this year or last year, and we don't know who nominated us to this day. I don't know if it's usually secretive, but when we asked, we were just told, you guys have a lot of fans, like, don't worry about it. But there was a part of me that was a little bit conflicted, because I don't know what it means to be a member. It's not a responsibility that I want to take lightly, and I just talked to a lot of people. I just didn't want to make that choice, superficially. I wanted to mean something. And when I talked to a lot of people, the most universal, ubiquitous, like resounding answer we always heard back was, you guys have to do this, because you have to be the voice of Armenians. You have to be the voice of immigrants. You have to be the voice of the other that, more and more the Academy is opening its doors to, but hasn't always historically been there for people like us.
Right.
So I think with that, we had no choice but to do it. Yeah, it's funny, man. When I look back, like, Natalie and I are, I don't know if we're the only ever husband and wife, but we've both received the Sundance Producer of the Year award. Like, obviously we got those lists. Like, it's so easy to look back and be like, dang, like, we're so successful and we're so lucky and all this stuff. But in the moment, man, like, I don't know how much any of that stuff means. Like, every day is still a gruel. Like, every day, like, nothing is easy. Like, there's far more losses than victories. I don't mean to sound too dejected and tired, but it's tough, man. Like, it genuinely, like, this industry, it's really demanding. And, I think I'll give an example. Like, we just released a movie called Missing, which is a sequel to our movie Searching. It's a movie we probably never thought we'd make. Searching was a movie we made for $880,000. It won Sundance, and we released it theatrically, made $75 million, which is nuts. Like, it made 75 times its budget.
Yeah.
And we've even felt like, even with Searching, it wasn't even quite marketed to its full potential. It still felt like A lot of people had never even heard of it, and he kind of made that money in spite of whatever. We just, we just did the unthinkable in our minds, which is Released Missing, which, is a very different movie intentionally. It doesn't go for the same emotional heights of Searching, but it's kind of doing its own thing. And the response has been so positive, man. Critics seem to really dig it. Audiences seem to love it. We've like snuck into theaters where people are like losing their minds, screaming at the screen, clapping, cheering. Like, it's awesome, but it still feels like, dang, like, once again, it's like, is there enough awareness of this movie? Like, it's kind of getting lost in the sauce. Like, we ask, should there have been a second trailer? Should it, there's not a single billboard made for this movie. There's no posters on the streets. And those are things that are not up to us. And it's like, we just spent 3 years really killing ourselves to make this movie as best as we can. But at the end of the day, like, there's only so much you as a filmmaker have access to. So, those are, to me, that always balances out all the victories we talk about. We're like, oh, you're on this list and you got this award. Of course, it's phenomenal. But, I think what keeps us humble is the fact that, again, like, for every win, there's like 7 losses.
Right. And to the point of, choosing your battles, like, how have you learned to take rejection? Because, like you said, it's more rejection than or losses than victories, right?
Yeah, man, rejection. I mean, luckily, I'm a very familiar person with rejection. Like, I'll just give the example of me and Anish as writers. That first script that we wrote, Animal Heist, that was the zoo heist movie, over the top one. I think it's a really good script. We won a few, like, we placed, fairly high in a couple of screenplay competitions, and we were desperate. But I was convinced that if we had an agent, we would kill, like, we would rule.
Right.
All we needed was one agent to believe in us. At the time, I was so naive. I didn't really know what the agent was supposed to do, but in my mind, it was like, okay, that's the end goal. Get an agent. Alex, we sent that script to everybody, man. Every agent I ever once even had a brief interaction with would send it to them. And agents that I had good interactions with, I would send it to them. I would send it to people who were rep by agents. I would send it to lawyers who knew agents. We genuinely, we had a spreadsheet. It was probably like close to 60 people we submitted this thing to.
Wow.
And 90% of them never even responded, despite us following up multiple times. The 10% that responded, it was lackluster. You could never be sure if anyone even read it. No one cared. And it was like, I remember the funny, I've told the story too. Like, Anish and I were at my parents' house, and my dad was like looking at us, and he was like, what are you guys working on? We're like, Dad, we're writing the script. We're going to sell it for $1 bajillion. I'll buy a Lambo or something. And he laughed, and he was like, I'll buy it right now from you guys for $200. And for the record, like, my dad at the time, he was a contractor. Like, he's not a rich man, but he was saying that almost as a joke. And we were like, we scoffed at him. We're like, Dad, $200, get out of here, man. We're going to be so rich. Nothing ever happened with that script. Nobody wanted to rep us. And in fact, I'm pretty sure we burned a lot of bridges by being so persistent, to the point that we actually went back to my dad and we're like, hey, do you want to buy that script still? $200, it's yours. And he said no. But the crazy thing is, the way we ended up making Searching was, I was producing like a short film for free in Utah. And one of the other producers on the short thought I was, I guess, pretty cool. And then she ended up getting a job at a company called Basilev's, which had produced and financed a movie called Unfriended, which was all on the computer screens as well. And they were looking to make another movie that would kind of be 8 short films, all of which were computer movies, in like, 8 short computer movies in a bigger movie as like an anthology. Yeah. They asked me to come in and have a meeting. And I think the meeting was based on, I guess, me being a decent producer. They were familiar with the fact that I had made the Google Glass thing. I then brought in Anish, and we thought of an idea for a movie called Search at the time, which would have been only an 8-minute version, in which a father, I guess you would see somebody breaking into a laptop login and realize that it's not the person who owns a laptop. You would then realize it's actually her father, and the reason she's doing it is because she's missing. And that was it. That was kind of the idea of the short. The financiers then said, we don't want to make this, which we were bummed, because Anish and I thought it might be kind of fun to do a short film while we were coming up with this bigger idea. And they said, we want you guys to write it, direct it, and produce it as a full movie. Like, Anish would direct it, I would produce it, and we would actually get paid to write. It was not paid a lot, but it was something. And it was amazing. And I remember at the time, Anish very vehemently said no, like in the moment. I genuinely, like a sitcom, had to kick him underneath the table. And I said, he means no problem. He means, we can do this. And, Anish's hesitation was clear. Like, he did not want his first movie to be like a computer screen gimmick movie. And for me, I did have the faith that we could figure it out and make it emotional. But for me, it was like, this opportunity is huge, man. Like, how often does anybody get a shot? And Anish came around, we came up with this great concept, we wrote a great script. Next thing you know, we're shooting this movie. Again, $800,000. We shot 90% of Searching. This is, I swear to God, a true story, in a porn house in the Valley. What I mean by that is we found a location that had like it was a house, like a large house that somebody had dressed one of the rooms like a prison cell, that just one of the rooms like a hospital room, that just one of the rooms like looking like a bar. And I remember being there being like, wow, this is amazing. Like, who else is shot here? Like, they're like, oh, lots of stuff. And we were like, what? And he was like, oh, you probably haven't seen them. And we're like, dude, we watch a lot of indie films, man. We've probably seen everything. And he was like, trust me, you haven't seen it. Like, on the last day of production, it occurred to us, we're shooting in a porno house. Like, literally, people have been having sex on every surface we're shooting on. And glad we left. But anyway, my point being, that tiny, humble movie that we had somehow, through the crazy series of events of me having enough of a reputation as being this young, upcoming producer, the fact that our project together got a niche, something that was a job directing at Google, all of that led, the fact that I made a short with that woman who remembered me to have me come have this meeting, the fact that we had a good idea, all of that led to us making this tiny, tiny movie that honestly, nothing could have come of. Like, obviously, we might look back at Searching and be like, of course that was going to be a hit. Like, you don't know that. Even John Cho, at the time, we were lucky to have him, no question, but like none of that was guaranteed. That's when all the agents started coming back. Everyone who had ignored us, who had rejected us, we started having meetings. We were getting wined and dined by the same places, and even in some cases, the same people who wanted nothing to do with us before. Whoa. And it was what really solidified for me, like, to get, in this case of getting representation, like, you don't get representation, like, representation gets you. And you can't force that. You got to just go do your own thing. They all want to sign people who they see are winners. So just, you got to try whatever you can. And it also really made me realize, like, why did we want an agent? Like, it's a weird thing. Like, we want to make movies, but you should think of getting an agent or a manager as a means to make movies, not the end. So all of, I guess it's just all a long way to say, like, what you're saying is exactly right. Like, the underdog nature and feeling like used to rejection, like, it hasn't stopped in so many other ways. But I think the more you get accustomed to it and accept that it's part of this industry, and frankly, probably part of so many industries, and certainly part of life, I think the healthier your relationship with it can be.
That's really great advice. And, as an Armenian, what hurdles have you faced in this industry? I mean, as you mentioned, it's historically, censored us, especially any depictions of the Armenian genocide. So I was wondering if that still kind of lingers in the industry. I know we're slowly drifting apart from Turkey, but yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, man. I mean, if I'm being really honest, my ethnicity as an Armenian American, looking back, was probably the most disadvantaged when I was in film school. I'm almost like ashamed to talk about this, but I remember being really quite hurt that I felt like I was being ostracized a little bit by some of the people in my class. I think people who look, there's an argument that our people sometimes say Armenians are white, or we're Caucasian, we're from the Caucasus, like, right. We should feel like we're not, we're not a people of color, for instance, we're not Black, we're not brown. I don't know. I think, like, we're Armenians. We are, I don't feel superior as an Armenian, like the idea of white people feeling, white supremacy or whatever. I don't feel that. I know my brothers and sisters in Artsakh have been losing their lives. As we speak, there's this horrific blockade that hasn't ceased. I know that there's entire places out there where Armenophobia is the rule of the law, rule of the land. So long way of saying, like, I remember, like, just genuinely feeling a little bit othered. And I think there was a part of that which kind of really drew me to like the people I really connected with in film school. I mean, like I said, it was an Armenian woman, an Indian guy, an African-American guy, and Ryan, a bunch of other people in my film school. I produced a film with a Black director, a Black writer. It just felt like I was more at home with people who were also, minority ethnicities. And, I think it's obviously Hollywood is still predominantly going to be what it is. it's been tough. Like, I think, I've wanted to make movies about Armenian topics, but I think for me, this early part of my career, it's been so crucial. Like, okay, I'll say this. I spent most of my childhood in an organization called Home Element Ararat. Or in my case, Home Element. It's like a huge international organization that really is about scouting, sporting. In my case, I spent 10 years as a scout, kind of like Boy Scouts of America, but it was co-ed. And there's a saying that is a core of this organization, which is Bar Tzatzir, Bar Tzatzur. What it essentially means is lift yourself up so that therefore you can lift others. And it's kind of been this thing I've been living my life with. And as it pertains to Armenians in the entertainment industry, I've any chance I get to work with an Armenian on a film, amazing. But for me, it's really been about establishing myself, proving myself to be invaluable in what I do. And when the time is right is when I want to tell those stories. And that time might be soon, it might be later. I have my mission, I have my goals, I know what are the stories that are important to me in the way that, I think anytime you see a filmmaker make a story that's really personal to them, I think it shines. But yeah, I think those early days at USC were kind of hurtful, but since then it hasn't been that much of an issue.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you never know. It's like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Spielberg released Jurassic Park in the same year, or just like within a year of Schindler's List. So yeah, I mean, it's, when so like you're saying, it could happen sooner or later. And I remember hearing Spielberg saying for him that he didn't know if he can do it, based on the prior movies that he was making and just the subject matter. So I guess, you definitely have to take that into account too.
Absolutely. I think my approach will probably not be to tell a story about the genocide.
Yeah.
At least not yet. I think my goals are probably more aligned into wanting to normalize and celebrate what it means to be an Armenian. I do think, sadly, the precedence that's been established for movies about the genocide hasn't been great, at least for the US film market. Right. So my gut is telling me to aim in a different direction, at least initially, and then bring it back when the time is right.
I mean, is writing or producing your primary or original passion? And I mean, do you have aspirations to direct again, or?
Yeah, I think my primary passion when I was coming up was to direct, because I frankly don't think I knew any better. In my mind, I thought that I want to tell stories, I want to create stories. And once I was in film school, I guess one of the beautiful benefits was I realized that it wasn't directing for me. I don't see myself honestly ever directing. I guess maybe if I ever have a TV show on the air that's run multiple seasons, maybe some version of that, like I do an episode or two. But honestly, I get so much fulfillment out of being a creative producer. There's a natural part of me that is very much an ADHD multitasking part, which I think you can really get as a producer. I also love writing, but I'm probably, producer first and then a writer second. I just, I love writing with Anish. I've also had a chance to write with Ryan Coogler. I've had a chance to write with another guy named Desi Gallegos, but Anish and I are the real primary partners. And I think we have a great thing going on. Producing for me is, I always think of like directing as, imagine somebody who's got one eye shut with tape and the other eye, they got a telescope attached to it. And they can't remove that telescope because their job demands that a director is detail oriented. And they have to walk on a set and walk in prep and walk in post, swinging that telescope around as they look at every detail, this costume, this line, this dialogue, pronunciation, this actor's hair, this location, this stunt, all these things. They're forced to constantly be looking at these details and make questions left to right. The producer's job is to be right next to them and not have that telescope on their eyes, but rather be looking with both eyes wide at everything. Because sometimes I think a director, by the virtue and nature of their job, is forced to make decisions about micro little things that might be interfering or contradicting decisions they made elsewhere. And it's our job to look for the vision of the story as a whole, holistically. I was raised, or I was trained at USC, I should say, by these amazing film professors who really instilled in us the idea that, like, this idea of filmmaking is like this director's vision is potentially antiquated or more marketing than actual reality. That the idea is that it's kind of a collective vision. It's not just the producers and directors, but kind of everybody. Everyone should have ownership over this movie, from editors to production designers and DPs to anybody. So, like I said earlier, like I think our job is to support the director's vision, but also at times to challenge that vision as well. So for me, it's like, you know, I get so much credit for filming. Like when I make these movies, like I feel ownership. Like, even if it's not like, oh, that particular line of dialogue I fought for, or like the take that we got as an alt that ended up in the final movie, that was something that I went toe to toe with the filmmaker for. It's not even just that. Like, I get that fulfillment out of producing. And again, like, luckily for me, I'm able to produce so many things at the same time that directors are kind of, you know, they can really only work on one project at a time if it fulfills me more. I also love writing, man. Like, I'm so, to me, like my approach to writing is very puzzle oriented. I often think about every movie being like, you know, like there is the right assembly of words that will create a work of art. This idea that like, you know, when you are, if you're creating a work of art by like chiseling a piece of stone, you're not creating that art, you're finding it. You know, like it's already there, like the beautiful face that you're trying to chisel into the stone. Like you just have to get everything else out of the way so you can see that. Like that is my philosophical approach to storytelling. It's, you know, what's the story going to be? What are we trying to tell like thematically about the story? Why are we telling the story? Okay, we're all good on those ideas. Okay, what is the approach? You know, like we test this, we test that, we come up with that, and use all the story examples that we've seen and watch and play video games and take all that and try and filter it into the structure of what is the, not only is like, what is the best way to tell the story, but kind of like, what is the only way? I imagine I'm probably rambling right now, but that is genuinely like the way I look at storytelling. And, you know, it has worked because the movies that we've written tend to be like mysteries and thrillers and kind of like in that world. This next movie that we're writing is a heist movie. So I think there's some similar DNA with like things that get set up and pay off and intricate. Instead of it being a sprawling mystery, it's kind of like a sprawling heist or con job. Like, how does it all fit together? So yeah, I think that puzzle approach is what I love. The same satisfaction I get of like escaping an escape room is really the feeling that we get when we like land on the exact line of dialogue to finish the scene.
Wow. Will there be any gorilla heist in a zoo in this one, or is it?
No, man, I wish. The truth is, this next movie, which I can't wait to talk about in more detail, it's a heist movie that in a lot of ways Anish and I mined from that first movie, that Animal Heist. I think we realized that we had this brilliant third act in that movie, and we're like, let's just take that wholesale and put it in this movie. And like little things like that. I think, is there a way that after this other movie we're working on comes out, can we still make the other movie? I think so. But yeah, I think Anish and I, we clearly love heists, we clearly love mysteries. But yeah, no gorillas in this one, at least not yet.
And Nicholas Johnson, he's making his feature directorial debut with Missing, which I intended to see last weekend, but it was my mom's birthday, so we had, you know, to do some stuff.
That is the best excuse to not see it.
But no, I'm going this week for sure. He edited, run, and served as the director of virtual photography. Mm-hmm. On Searching. So I guess two questions would be, is the DVP similar to the DP? Mm-hmm. And you know, was it a leap of faith going with Nicholas, I guess a first time director, or is this something you like to do, is give, you know, young talent opportunities, I guess? Risks, right? I don't know how much of a risk it was, because obviously, you know Nicholas, and you know, you can probably, you know, see much better than I guess the rest of us that, you know, he definitely could pull it off. But so what's your philosophy on that, you know, totally, risks, man, and young directors like propping up talent?
Yeah, and you know, Missing was actually written and directed by Nick Johnson and Will Merrick. It was a duo.
Oh, okay.
And both of them were the editors of Searching and the directors of virtual photography. So for anyone who hasn't seen Searching, it's a movie that takes place entirely on computer screens.
Yeah.
But it's not like any of the other computer screen movies that you may have seen. Usually those movies are kind of like one big wide shot and things just unfold in front of you, almost like you're watching someone use their computer, and it's kind of being recorded and played back for you. Our movie was more by design, more cinematic. Like we have edits, we punch in, we move the camera around, we have dolly zooms, have editing montages. It's very subjective at times. So that required a very distinct approach to the filmmaking style. In a lot of ways, they're really like Pixar animated movies that were making for a fraction of the cost. Will Merrick and Nick Johnson were the editors of Searching. We found them both at USC again. We work with them as students, and they were so integral to what that movie became that we just realized that the editor credit was not enough. Like it didn't do justice to what they were doing, because usually an editor shows up on day one of their job and they ingest footage that has already been shot, and then they just assemble it in a certain order, literally creating what's called an editor's assembly. For Will and Nick, their first day of editing was 7 weeks before we shot Searching. And wow. Because the reason was, I remember I was obsessed with this idea of like trying to create a pre-visualization, that their first day on the job was them taking screenshots of various websites and literally starting to animate them. They would perform as the characters themselves, or Anish would perform as a character, and they would put that on the screen, and they would try and, composite what this movie can look like. And by the time those 7 weeks ended, we had a full cut of the movie with not a single actor, not a single day of photography. It was all just temp, all really low resolution graphics, them acting as all the characters. And we were able to look at that and actually do another pass of the story and realize what's not working, what is working. And we were able to screen that for the entire crew before we shot the movie. And they're like, oh, that's what we're doing. Now we understand what this movie is. Wow. And the reason I wanted to push for this is because of intentionality. I didn't want to go shoot Searching. We shot in 13 days. I didn't want to go shoot all the video elements and then in the edit realize, fudge, I wish John Cho was looking left. Or man, like this whole scene has a backdrop of Facebook, which is very predominantly blue, but she's wearing blue too. So like their colors are clashing, like if we kind of knew some of these things, we can lean into the idea of having complementary colors. And, there's this thing called mise en scène or whatever, which is like how you have intentionality in your framing and like those were all things that I figured would make the movie feel more elevated. And also it gave the actors a sense of like, wait, what am I looking at right now? Because oftentimes they're just staring at a camera, not an actual laptop. So Will and Nick, to do all those things, it's so much more than editing. We came up with this title called Director of Virtual Photography, because similar to how a cinematographer places the camera and moves the camera, these guys were doing the same thing with this virtual camera. Every time we zoom in and push left, obviously a lot of it was Anish dictating and directing, but a whole lot of it was not. It was them presenting it to Anish, presenting it to us as something they had done themselves. So the story is Searching 1 comes out, it made all this great money and all this great business. 6 months later, I get a call from the people at Sony, and they were asking me, we want to make Searching 2. And I thought it was a joke, because we were like, Alex, we have been on the record multiple times saying we will never make a sequel. And they were like, we want to make Searching 2. Can John Cho's other kid go missing or something? And we were like, guys, there's no way. I hung up the phone.
Like the Taken sequels.
Exactly. Yeah. I hung up the phone and Ryan Coogler was right next to me because I was working with them on one of our other projects. And he was like, why are you laughing? And I told him Sony wants to make a sequel to Searching. You're never going to do it. But to my surprise, Ryan was, what do you mean? Like, you guys should totally do it. And he was dead serious. He was a fan of that first movie. I think he always said it was really cool that we kind of have our own franchise. It's not based on any comic books. It's not based on any books. It's kind of like our own thing. And he really was like, if anyone can do this, it's got to be you guys. So I called Natalie, I called Anish. Anish was never going to direct another movie on a computer screen, which is totally his right. And we realized that the only people on the planet that could do justice to this were Nick and Will. And you're right, it was their first time writing a movie. It was their first time directing a movie. But it wasn't quite a leap of faith because I just had that confidence having seen them do it. And again, no one else could have done it. But we asked them to write a spec script. So like just another movie, just to know, do they at the very basic level know how to write? Okay. And we were hoping that it would be like, decent. To our shock, it was like phenomenal. We're like, oh my God, you guys are incredible writers. And then we made a deal with the studio that Anish and I would write an outline. So Anish and I wrote a 29-page outline that kind of was the treatment, or, you know, like essentially all the major beats of what would become missing. We kind of knew early on, and I won't spoil the movie, but we knew early on it couldn't be another John Cho movie. It has to be an original story set in the same world. The idea was, instead of a parent looking for a child, let's have a child look for a parent. Instead of the parent having access to the missing person's computer, let's have this time have the child, the main character, have access to like the bad guy's computer. And we just found all these ways to remix what that Searching movie was. And then, you know, we spent many, many years making it. But yeah, it was, I don't know if I necessarily look to champion young or newer filmmakers. Some of the best movies I've ever made were exactly those movies though. Oh man, Edward Scissorhands.
The Italian Edward Scissorhands poster.
Oh, yo, that's awesome.
Yeah, I minored in Italian in college. So the story of that is, I basically, you know, I started learning it in middle school. And then they offered classes in high school too, in my district. And so I was like, you know, I think ever since middle school, I wanted to go study abroad in Florence. And I ended up still continuing my classes in at Loyola Marymount, so in LA as well. But like it was just, eventually I had enough credits to minor in it, because I had already been, you know, I didn't start at the beginner level in college. And I mean, I was almost fluent by the time I studied, finishing studying abroad. But like, I don't know, I haven't spoken in like 10 or 11 years. But yeah.
Are you able to, if you go to Italy now, do you think you can
I could probably pick it back up. Yeah, I think so. But it's weird because it's not like a native language for me. So I don't know. I'd have to try it out. Yeah, I haven't been back since studying abroad, but I really want to. Language is something that I'm fascinated in, you know, just whether it's learning a new language or like learning a new medium of storytelling, a new way of communicating. And I think to that point, Anish, I consider him one of the pioneers of that technology, I guess, right? I mean, you said Unfriended was before Searching, but I remember, I think it was back when Searching came out, and they offered, or I got like a press release for an interview with Anish, but one of my coworkers was already doing it. So but they were saying that, you know, he like definitely has perfected the technology. And I don't know, I'm curious to hear a little bit about that, as well as you were saying, you know, Nicholas and the other director, I'm
Will,
sorry,
yeah.
his name, Will. Yeah, it's it seemed like it was basically like a virtual or a visual storyboard, right? That they had created as well. It could also double as that. I mean, you see it lay out, and it's certainly more helpful. I mean, I'm sure you had a storyboard as well, but it's kind of a new frontier. You're combining several different like technologies and mediums.
We did not have a storyboard. The idea was, there was a movie called Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow. Have you ever seen it or heard of it?
Is that the one with
Law, Angelina Jolie?
I have heard of it, but yeah, I haven't seen it.
So when I was much younger, I saw that film and I saw the special features. The whole movie is like actors in front of a green screen, and all of it like this beautiful, like, you know, like retro futuristic, like art design in the background. The director, what I read, what I heard, or what I saw in the special features was, he shot the entire movie with like his friends, and then spent a year painstakingly finishing the animation in the background. Then he screened that movie for actors like Angelina Jolie, or like, you know, Jude Law, or even the producers or whatever. And they were like, yo, this shit's amazing. And then Angelina was like, okay, I'll be in your movie. So she had to just go shoot like 5 days just in front of the green screen, and the movie was already done, and you could just plop it right there. And I remember I was really, like I said, I was really wanting to make sure that Searching would be very intentional, that it would feel, no, even though we were shooting it for like $10, that it could feel like a bigger, higher budget kind of thing. And I think Anish was a little bit reluctant to do this because in his mind, he's like, I just want to go shoot the movie. And I think early on, he was like, well, maybe I could just do like 10 minutes. But I was like, man, we got to make the whole movie like this. And Will and Nick, the phenomenal editors that they did. Anish was amazing. He was performing as a 16-year-old missing girl, like beautifully. And this thing worked. And that's kind of the first thing we were like, man, like this might be an engaging cinematic experience. It was helpful that Anish had been working at Google, because a lot of the Google commercials he was even directing were on screens. It was like, oh, open up your Google search and you could scroll down and see this beautiful picture and go to this photo app. It was really like the perfect team, the perfect people, all in the right place at the right time. And, a lot of credit also should go to Timur Bekmambetov and the people at Baslev's, because they did pioneer with Unfriended. And when we were starting searching, they actually told us that here's like the rule book. Like it has to be real time. It has to be one shot. It has to be objective. And when we told them that's not what we wanted to make, we wanted to make something even crazier. I think, for me, like I was like, man, there's been 100 years of like cinematic techniques that have been perfected by these incredible filmmakers. Why would we not do any of that? It would feel like we're making a movie on a wide shot as if it was like, 1910 or whatever, and you're watching like those first movies. So Timur was amazing. Like he was like, please take this language that I've developed and you guys should evolve it. And, I think with Will and Nick directing, one of our goals going into it was to really build upon Searching. Like, I think we think about Searching as Ridley Scott's Alien, and we think about Missing as James Cameron's Aliens. Wow. It's generally the same storyline, right? It's like in both movies are about someone searching for a lost family member using technology, and it's all set on screen. So that's the same log line for both movies. But we wanted the second one to feel like we're, again, another example is the first one, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, the second one, Spider-Verse, like just bigger, crazier, like by design, we wanted to go wall to wall, more action, more chaos. And I think we achieved it. I'm happy to say I think we did.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's been like you said, it's been getting amazing reviews. And so I'm super excited about that. And I've actually rewatched the Space Jam. I guess it's a remake or a sequel.
Yeah.
A couple of times. And it's actually, grown on me. I definitely appreciate it now, because I realize it's kind of, I think what it was aiming for is like the corporatization of art is really how I saw it. And that's actually a great allegory. And I mean, even though I didn't get
not at all
reviews, but I'm wondering if there was like you said, you had a story to tell about it, I think. Speaking of I guess negotiating with producers or studios early on in your career, like what was the experience like making this movie? I don't know if it was one of your first for Space Jam. Yeah. I think it was it your first like big budget movie?
It was. That was my first like out of this world budget. I mean, it was challenging. It was really, really challenging. And thanks for the generous outlook on the movie. I think what's funny is those movies take so long to make. It was not without its ups and downs. I think one thing that we're proud of is I think people have been trying to make a sequel to Space Jam for 20 plus years. I think just the fact that one got made at all was nice. It is a movie that families tend to love. Like anyone that I know that's under the age of 13, that movie is like their favorite movie on the planet. It was a challenging movie, man. I mean, we had a lot of moving pieces when it came to the studio, when it came to filmmakers. I would probably argue that critics are probably harder on the movie because it feels almost undeniably so like an advertisement for HBO Max, like literally. Although when the movie was made, like the sad thing is that wasn't even Warner Brothers' like mandate. They were never saying make this movie. That was something that came from a filmmaker. But and I think when the movie was made, HBO Max did not exist. Look, I'm proud of it, man. I think that movie has a lot of heart. I think LeBron James is a great human being, man. Like I'm so humbled by like the work ethic he brought to that thing and how much passion he brought. And saying that as not, and I'm saying that as not even a basketball fan. Like I wasn't even that familiar, but yeah, I think that the takeaways there are, man, like you gotta those battles become infinitely harder to fight as the budgets go up. I mean, it's no secret, right? Like more money, more problems. But the funny thing is like the battles are still very much the same.
Speaking of LeBron, I know Peter Nix, he runs your nonfiction department, for lack of
Yes.
right. I don't know what its official title is, but at
Yeah,
Proximity.
he's the head of nonfiction at Proximity, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. And so he directed the Steph Curry doc. I'm so excited to see that because obviously
Yes.
I'm, born and raised in the Bay Area. So you've had a chance to really, I guess, I don't know if you met Steph, but like work on both subjects and kind of get to know more about more of these athletes. So purely speaking from an athletic perspective, I was wondering like what your take is on the everlasting debate of okay, where does Jordan land? Where does LeBron land? Where does Steph Curry land? Because a lot of people say that, he's the best shooter of all time, but not the best player. And I really think there's an argument that could be made that he might be the best player of all time. But I guess that depends on, the future. And
there's still time.
yeah, I don't know. What's your take?
Look,
Who's your top like three?
I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm genuinely not somebody who dabbles in sports. I've spent the most time with LeBron, so I'll say he's my favorite. But Steph seems to be an amazing person. I remember for me, like it's so sad to say this, but it was when Kobe died. The unfortunate passing of Kobe. That was the and of course all the people that sadly perished with him. But like that was the first time it really dawned on me why sports and athletes in particular are phenomenal people. Because, take for example, and I'm not saying any of this to take away from anybody, but like when you think about what an actor does, it's incredibly grueling work. But on some level, somebody could argue they're reading lines that someone else wrote. They're wearing clothes that someone put on them. They're being lit a certain way. They're being VFX a certain way, or like hair and makeup, whatever. They're being directed, they're being told, or even a singer, like they may not write their own songs, or there's, the band, or like, voice synthesizing, whatever. Like it feels like sports, and again, coming from somebody who does not consider themselves a sports fan, like sports is the only human endeavor in which the person is literally on their own. Obviously, they're team sports, of course, but like when you see Steph on the basketball court, no one is telling him like where to throw that ball. No one is VFXing to make him have this incredible jump shot. Like no one is, that's him. That's literally him as a single human being achieving all that stuff in front of your eyes multiple times a night. And I think that has given me so much admiration for the art of athleticism. And again, sadly, it took, Kobe's way too early passing to like make me realize that. And it really gave me even more of a respect for people like LeBron and Steph, who, I've been lucky to work with on some levels. I've only met Steph very briefly. I did not work closely with him at all on the Steph Curry doc, but I know Peter killed it. That doc is amazing. And whether you're a sports fan or someone who has a faint idea of who Steph Curry is, it is a documentary that will get you so in an amazing mood, because it's, it's called Underrated. It's about how this guy who genuinely, he was not destined to be great, how he overcame everything he did to become exactly who he is.
God, I can't wait. When is it going to be officially released?
I don't know if we've actually announced that yet, but it's going to be not too long from now. And it'll be an Apple release, which is really cool.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
I wanted to just, say how much I enjoyed Black Panther 2. I found it kind of like how the white kind of Western hegemony forces like two minority nations or groups against each other. And I don't really think Namor is the villain in Wakanda Forever. And, I guess nations being pitted against each other for, a sinister power's purpose.
I watched that movie not wanting the Wakandans to destroy the Talokan. I was like, no, don't fight. No, stop, Shuri. Don't rip off Namor's, wings or whatever. And I think that while it's not making for the most quote unquote satisfying traditional watch of a 4-quadrant blockbuster movie, I think that unsettling feeling is probably interesting, because I think that's what makes me want to remember that film. It's an ambitious movie, man. Like, I don't know how they did that. Like, I genuinely, speaking about like obstacles, and like, they lost this incredible actor, incredible human being. It feels like, from everything I've heard, I've never had the privilege of meeting Chadwick, but it sounds like he was more than the glue that kept everyone together. So the fact that they made any movie at all, let alone this amazing film that they made, I don't know, like, it's staggering to me. And I agree with you 100%. Like, that third act is rough, man. You just don't want anyone to be fighting. You want them to just come together. And obviously they do at the end, but there's still something potentially uneasy about that. And it makes you want to lean in, and it makes you, I don't know, it keeps you up at night. I'm so proud of my friend Ryan for how he and the whole team made that movie to honor Chadwick and still satisfy and entertain fans.
I loved Fruitvale Station. So I've been following your career for quite some time. As someone who lives in the Bay Area, Fruitvale Station, we all know that story. It was a really great central performance, I think. And now you're coming full circle with Creed.
Yes, with Michael directing. Exactly.
Exactly, with Michael directing. So I think it's great that you're doing that. And I know I called you on the set, but you made me even more excited for the film. So I cannot wait.
Man. I can't wait. Michael, this is so cheesy, but he like knocked this one out the park. Like, it's so not what you're expecting, but yet satisfying all the same. I'm so proud of this movie. I'm so proud of my work on the movie. I'm proud of everyone's work on the movie, but Michael B. Jordan, man, who would have thought? He's a phenomenal director. Like, I can't wait to see what he directs next. Forget what he's starring in next,
Wow. Sev, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and generosity.
No, man, thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
I know how busy your schedule is. So forever, rooting for you, a fellow Armenian artist. And
I'm glad we finally got a chance to Zoom, and I can't wait to do it in person. And I can't wait to talk more about this particular movie that I'm working on with you when the time is right.
And that's a wrap with Sev Ohanian on Shattering Superstructure. It was a long one, and there was a lot of ground covered, but I hope you found it worthwhile and enjoyed our conversation. And on that note, this is Alex signing off. See you next time. Thanks, listeners.